Have you noticed how many of the cutting-edge websites nowadays include eye-catching three-dimensional animations? Have you ever wanted to add something like that to your own Hype project? Or maybe you've researched these sites a little and heard about the Three.js library. And now you want to know how to integrate it into your development workflow. Well then, this video is designed to help get you started. But before we begin, it's important to know that this library has a steep learning curve, and significant coding is necessary to integrate and customize a Three.js component into a Hype project. However, I'll do my best to streamline this process by providing you with up-to-the-moment solutions and best practices for some of the major issues and pitfalls you are likely to encounter. So, if that sounds interesting to you, let's start by looking at how to best configure a Three.js element in Hype. There is a lot to consider. Three.js is a relatively small library. The base JavaScript package is only about 1 megabyte, but much of its functionality and code weight arises from optional modules it imports at runtime. Modern Three.js uses ES6 modules for this purpose. These modules are an improvement to JavaScript that allows code to be divided into smaller interacting parts. The switch to ES6 modules is relatively recent, so beware of sample code in old tutorials, especially those authored in 2017 or earlier. You should also be aware that Three.js is updated frequently and isn't designed to be backward compatible. A project configuration that uses these ES6 modules facilitates a more logical and scalable organization. It splits code into many smaller modules, each of which deals with a single aspect of the overall project. This makes customizing and maintaining your project more straightforward. Three.js and its modules can be included directly in your Hype project or imported from a content delivery network. Whichever method you choose, you'll need to reconcile the heavily layered directory structure of Three.js with the directory structure used in Hype. In many cases, Three.js expects this particular directory structure and has even hard-coded it into much of its example code. So it's crucial that you understand how to organize these files. Studying this example code is an excellent way to learn what's possible in Three.js. There is an exhaustive collection of these examples on the Three.js website. If you're trying the Three.js library for the first time, there are 2 additional resources that are particularly useful for learning the intricacies of this library. I've shown links to these resources here. These resources are both free and were written by experienced members of the Three.js community. Both are very concise and describe up-to-the-moment ways to use this library. Either one is an excellent starting point if you are new to Three.js or if you are a past user but haven't looked at it in a while. By default, the layered directory structure preferred by Three.js isn't compatible with Hype's flat directory structure. You'll need to make some strategic adjustments to get the existing Three.js example code to work in Hype. Here I'll describe a Hype project structure where all the necessary parts of Three.js are packaged within the project. This structure also aligns with a typical Three.js development workflow, so there are many advantages to adopting this approach. And it has the additional advantage that your app will work offline as well. There are 3 essential elements of this file structure in Hype. Firstly, there is a main.js file designated as type equals module that's loaded in the head of your Hype document. This file is the entry point for all the other JavaScript code in your project. All other code files are referenced relative to the location of this file. You'll need to add this manually because Hype doesn't include this type designation. Defining this file as a module tells the browser that ES6 modules are being used and defers its loading until everything else has loaded. Once loaded, the main.js file calls world.js. This file is the second main element of our Hype file structure. It coordinates all the different parts of your Three.js component. World.js first loads the actual Three.js library but does this in a way that separates it from the other code that is specific to your project. Next, World.js loads several smaller JavaScript files that define individual aspects of your 3D animation, things like the camera position, lighting, and controls, etc. I know that this file structure may seem overly complicated, but compartmentalizing your code like this will spare you from many headaches later on as you build and refine your own original animations. Another thing to note is that the main Three.js library file in the future will be 3.module.js. Previously, this file was called just 3.js or 3.min.js, but these files are being phased out in favor of a library better designed to support ES6 modules. This pattern of successively importing code blocks as they are required is made possible by ES6's import syntax. This syntax has the general form of import a function from a module. This sounds simple, but getting the syntax correct is sometimes tricky because these files don't always reside in the same place as the module that called them, and therefore you must use relative directory paths to make the right connections. This is the most likely pitfall you'll face in configuring your project to use ES6 modules. Depending on how you import the Three.js library and its associated modules, will dictate exactly what the directory structure might be. For instance, when you import Three.js from a CDN, the location of the library and its modules can be quite convoluted, like this piece of code. In contrast, when the library and related modules are added to Hype's resource folder, then the directory address is more straightforward, like this code. Unfortunately, there is one more potential stumbling block. Many supplementary modules refer back to the base Three.js library, and so they must also have the correct directory address, otherwise, the whole animation will stall. If you are trying to recreate some Three.js example code in Hype, this means that you may need to check the import statements in each additional module to ensure it points to the resource folder and not some legacy path. So here is a simple Hype project I've made using this scheme. You can't see anything except a background image yet because Three.js only creates its display canvas at runtime. However, you can see how all the individual code modules are assembled in the resources folder. When we run this project in a browser, you can see how Three.js has rendered a simple Hello Cube animation with realistic lighting against our background image. I'll post this code example to the Hype forum so you can dig more deeply into the JavaScript code. I hope you enjoyed this short introductory video and appreciate the power of using ES6 modules and Three.js together in Hype. I'm sure that you could probably construct a simpler example, but my goal here has been to describe an approach that helps you better organize and future-proof your Three.js projects. If you're interested to learn more about using the Three.js library in your Hype projects, keep an eye out for future videos on the Altered Mindware YouTube channel.